kick it off. Kirk Spradley, had you back on here. I really appreciate it, man. Got your book, War Junkie. Thank you for sending me that after the last episode we did. I think people should go check it out. It's really interesting. It starts out with kind of where we ended, I think, where you talk about your friend Bama that got killed while you were with Blackwater over in Ramadi.
That's right.
So let's talk about, I want to ask some more about Blackwater itself.
Sure.
And then some of your stuff in Ramadi. Like, at Blackwater, you were a driver. How were teams comprised? Yeah. What were the different, like, because I imagine there were different teams, like helicopter teams, like raid teams, maybe there were snipers. I know that. So what were like some different roles for Blackwater contractors, and how did you guys employ them?
Sure. In Blackwater, for all intents and purposes, started in 2004. Now there was a training section back in the 90s. And they had some guys do some work in Afghanistan, and I want to say 2002 and stuff like that. But Blackwater, as we know it, as you know it, kind of really let's call it 2003, but it really got kicking in 2004. The majority of the programs were the State Department Diplomatic Security Service, which was what I was trying to do as a federal agent after I got out of the Marines. And generally speaking, you have about, and it varies, but let's just say for easy math that you have 4 to 5 vehicle motorcade. You have a principal or a protectee, and he's usually he's a State Department, a U.S. State Department person. He's a GS-15 or higher, and he's the ambassador's representative in that area, like a regional embassy office, a REO. Let's say, and if you look at this picture over here, I don't know if you can see it very well, but that's about a 12-man team. It was pretty standard for a State Department gig. Now, in 2004, what you had a driver for each vehicle. You had an agent in charge. You had a shift leader, and then the protectee, and then everybody kind of had a job. Now they had to adjust that because that came from the Diplomatic Security Service that was normally in a high threat area, but not a war zone, and they kind of adopted it from the Secret Service, the U.S. Secret Service's presidential protective detail. So it had to be adjusted, and what we adjusted is we had a machine gunner, and my first job was the machine gunner on what they call the Diamond. Because of the threat, we needed someone with a belt-fed weapon, and during an attack, I would move up as close to the threat as I could and just start, laying down suppressive fire. And the members of the Diamond, which is, 4 people, with me, the machine gunner in the back, and a shift leader and a agent in charge. It's really 6 people, but it looks like a diamond as it's walking. And they get him off the X. It was just kind of an unwritten rule. Like, hey, Kirk, man, you're the machine gunner. You understand what that means. And it's like, yeah, man, I have to be the one guy fucking shooting, and everybody else gets off the X, man. And it's just, that was the job. But I wanted to do it. Absolutely. I was picked for it, but I also wanted to do it. So that was unique. Now, about 6 months after that, they started what they call the DDM, Designated Defensive Marksman. We weren't allowed to have snipers, but we had snipers. We just had to call them defensive marksmen, but it was the same thing. No one had helicopter support. We had a couple of little birds, MD-530s, which I flew for the Kurds, by the way. But we had those, but they were assigned to the ambassador, or they were assigned to the CPA. I forgot what his title was, but Paul Bremer, he was the head of the Coalition Provincial Authority. Mm-hmm. But because they were privately owned by Blackwater, Erik Prince, they were kind of a QRF for everyone else. It was kind of an unwritten rule, like, hey, we're Blackwater. If we really need air support, we can call the little birds. And then they'll talk to the detail leader, which was Frank Gallagher, a former Recon Marine as well. He was the team leader there, but he would always allow the aircraft to be tasked out. because they had so much support for Bremer. So that was kind of the way the team was. About 4 or 5 vehicles. One was the limousine or the limo, and then of course we had to have a CAT truck, counter assault team, and we always called it the hate truck because it was all the guys with guns and stuff in the back. But officially it would be called a CAT truck, a counter assault team truck, and that's the last vehicle in the motorcade. So you have a lead car. No, you have an advanced car, a lead, a limo, a follow, and then the CAT truck. So you could have 4 or 5 vehicles, and then each person has a duty. In that business, they consider the driver to be the most prestigious position because you can always find work somewhere as a security driver. It's a lot of responsibility, and it's an expensive vehicle, and everyone's life is in your hand. Now, I didn't really want to be a driver. I love being the machine gunner, but the first driving job I had was driving the CAT truck, the hate truck. And man, I was like, oh yeah, brother, this is the ticket, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, guns, bristle. We had a PKM in the back, man. It was just crazy. It was as close as you could get to driving a tank without, driving a tank. So I loved it. The thing about, like I said, in that business, if you want to have a good career, you have to be a good driver. Now, if you're a good medic or if you're a good guy, you're going to find work. But the most prestigious job was to be a good driver. And so when I went to Ramadi, I dare say my reputation preceded me, and so they immediately gave me the limo driver in Ramadi, which was the most prestigious job on that team.
Was it an actual limo, or is it you just call it that?
No. It's just what you call anywhere that the boss is in is referred to as the limo. It can be an armored Suburban. It could be an armored Land Cruiser. I just happen to have a sedan in Ramadi. It was a Mercedes-Benz, a 600 series, I think it was. Weighed about 9,000 pounds. It was a level 7 armored vehicle. It was. I ran off the road, man, trying to catch up to the lead car. We were going down to we were going to Baghdad via Fallujah, and we were taking these back roads, and we couldn't do training, so you just had to go out and do it on the fly. And I'm trying to catch this because I don't know where the hell I am, and I got the boss in the back, and I got this dev group guy with me, and he was he wasn't I don't want to speak ill of that community. He specifically just was no help. I'm not saying Dev Group is a bad group of. He was one of those guys, man. I was like, hey, man, I could really use your fucking help. It was just like, well, you should know where you're going. No, man, I've been here a week. I don't know where I'm going, but you've been here for 3 months, so you can help me. But anyway, I ran off the road, man. I ran off the road. I took a turn too fast, and 9,000 pounds doesn't turn on a dime, and the shocks went up into the fender wells.
Oh.
I was like, well, that's bad. And I'm correcting to try to get back on the road. And again, 9,000 pounds, man, I slid to the other side of the road, and there's these kids, and like I'm in a dust storm basically that I created, and I'm sliding back to the other side of the road, and I see these kids, and their eyes are this because I'm about to run them over, and they jump out. I mean, it looked like something out of, I don't know, Dukes of Hazzard or a movie or something. I get it back on the road, and man, this thing is all jacked up, man. There's just no way. But what are you going to do, man? You can't just stop at you can't go to the AAA in Fallujah. So, man, I drove it, and it was, just I could hear the shocks and the tires rubbing, and the steering wheel was like this to keep it straight. I was like, man, this is just bad. And we wound up going down to Baghdad after we did everything and drop it off. And they were like, you came from where with this thing? And I was like, yeah, we came from Ramadi. They're like, dude, you're fucking nuts, man. This thing is all fucked up. But they always tell you, man, your first line of defense is the vehicle, and drive. That's what they always tell you. Whenever something goes bad, drive. That was kind of the standard.
Yeah, that's crazy. I was going to ask how hard they were to drive, and I imagine the different vehicles had different, you know, like a high Suburban is going to be weird because it's got that high center of gravity, right? With all that weight.
That's right.
You know, for those that don't know,
Yeah.
like you're talking about that level 7 armor, that's thick ass doors, glass, everything on it. How, I mean, even with that armor though, that's not very protective against IEDs, right? Like there's not very much undercarriage protection, and it's kind of too low to let the blast blow out like you have with the MRAPs.
That's exactly right. And that's why our defense was not looking like a motorcade. The State Department wanted us to look like, you know, because they were the customer and they're like, hey, this is how we do business. And we would shake our heads like, yes, sir. And then they'd leave because nobody wants to hang out in Ramadi or wherever, you know, anywhere in Iraq. They go back to DC. So we would just go back to doing things the way we should, with about a in a city, about a 5-car interval between each vehicle. Out on the roads, 10 plus, man. You really want to spread out. And we drove extremely fast, so they couldn't really time us. The most dangerous thing we could do, generally speaking, was to come up on a U.S. mail convoy, because they're doing about 45 miles an hour. And once you kind of unmask, you know, like you can kind of blend in with traffic to an extent until you come up on a convoy if you're with the State Department, because it's not like the OGA stuff where you're wearing local dress. You're obviously an American, you know. Some guys wore helmets, you know, stuff like that for IEDs or whatever, contact. But so you come up on this convoy. In fact, we were going down to Fallujah one day, and again, I was the limo driver. I didn't have the boss with me this time. And so I'm the number 3 vehicle, and we come up to the rear of the convoy, and you do what's, you know, you put on your flashers, and you put the VS-17 panel and the American flag in the front of the car to let them know, hey, you're an American. And hopefully it's a guy who's, you know, been around, and he'll wave you forward, and he'll allow one car at a time to pass, because they don't really know that you're American. I mean, you know what I mean? I get it. I understand they're everyone's trying to kill those guys. Mm-hmm. So they're letting us up one at a time. Well, the rear gunner allowed me to pass when it was my turn. And for whatever reason, he decided he didn't want me to pass. And he just starts shooting at my car, and all the rounds go underneath the car. And I was like, you know, what the fuck, man? So I get, you know, the Dev Group guy, he gets on the radio like, hey man, we're being shot at by the Army. So we pull off on the side of the road, outside Fallujah, man. You know, who does this? You know, I'm pulling off on the side of the road. And our team leader would talk to their convoy commander. I believe he was an E7, a sergeant first class. And he was like, hey, what the fuck, man? You just cleared us to pass. Now your guy just shot up our car, $300,000 car, man. That's our limo. And he goes, man, I'm really sorry. He's 18 years old. He's been here 2 weeks. He's right out of infantry school. You know, hey man, you know, what were you doing when you were 18? You know, that type of thing. And so I always try to give those guys sympathy and kind of give them their due. You know, man, everybody had a tough job over there for sure. Nobody had a cooler job than the other person, and everybody was under stress. And at the end of the day, man, I didn't get killed, so I kind of blew it off. But it was just shit like that was kind of the dangerous stuff for us.
Part of the game. Yeah. I mean, for those that don't know, they used to, there was like all kinds of protocols for passing a convoy. I know for civilians, they would have, I know for a little while they had like red and green flags. You know, they had the signs on the rear vehicle, like do not pass. And then they would sometimes shoot pin flares at them if they were getting too close. And the threat is, you know, those car bombs. And that really was a threat. I mean, we even had that in Afghanistan. I remember a British vehicle got blown up and killed 5 of their soldiers, not too far from where we were at in Sangin. And I was just like, man, that would be, and after you hear, like, especially if you're there and you hear about an incident like that happening, and then you're in a convoy, and immediately you start thinking about that all the time, because you're like, fuck. Because there's not much you can do when a car pulls up on you and decides to blow up. I mean, that's just, that's a tough gig. And definitely, you know, 18-year-old kid just got there.
Yeah,
Like, of
man.
course,
Yeah.
mistakes can happen.
Yeah. What does he know, man? You know,
When something like happens to the vehicles, I imagine you guys had mechanics or whatever in country that would work on them, or how did that? I know before I think on the last interview, you said that if a vehicle got destroyed, it may not always get replaced, or it may not get replaced for months because you got to wait for a new one to come into country. So how did that work?
yeah. So basically, you had the official and then the unofficial. Officially, you went through KBR in Baghdad. So if you could get your vehicle down there, or if you could put it on a flatbed convoy going down or something like that, you would just, I think you tell the team leader, and maybe he sent an email to somebody, and if your vehicle is all jacked up, it would go out on the next convoy or whatever. They'd put it on the back of a flatbed. That's the official way to do it. The unofficial way was, we were Blackwater. We could get booze, and nobody else could get booze. So, man, you would just go make friends with like the guys at Motor T, or guys at whatever contract company. Be like, hey, Bob, how's it going, man? Hey, cool, man. Hey, man, I see you got some welding stuff or whatever. Yeah, man. Hey, man, what can I do for you? Man, I've never shot a machine gun. I'd love to. Well, man, fuck. How about Saturday we take you out to the range, man? You want to shoot a grenade launcher? Oh, fuck. That type of thing. Or maybe they'll want booze. Hey, man, what do you drink? Well, I like Jack Daniels. Well, shit, man, I got a case, man. How about I break you off a couple bottles, man? And well, what can I do for you, man? I would love if you weld some big spike things on the front of the bumper or whatever. So you had the official and then the unofficial way of getting stuff done, man.
When I was in Iraq in 2009, we had this British security contractor that would bring in his vehicle every once in a while, and he'd always bring in a flat of like Starbucks coffee drinks and be like, hey, what's up, guys? Hey, can I get an oil change? And like, we would do nothing crazy, but like, a couple little things. We're always like, yeah, man. Like, we probably would have done it even without that, because we're like, we're all fascinated. We're Motor T guys on fucking TQ, We're like, whoa, you're out there doing it, Like, that's crazy. Look at this badass truck. But yeah, that was definitely an unofficial way of doing it. I mean, there was anything tracked, but yeah, that's funny, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if I asked you this. Sorry. I don't know if I asked you this last time, but Blackwater made watches for guys. Did you get one of those that has like the beacon in it?
No, I'm not totally familiar with that. They were really put on the map because of what they call the Battle of Najaf in 2004.
Yeah.
It was in 2004. And they were given, all the guys that were on that team were given custom rifles, I want to say, with the Blackwater logo. But no, I never got the Blackwater watch.
It's a Breitling, however you say it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't know how to say it. No, I never got one.
Yeah, that would have been sick to get. I think they said I saw an interview with Erik Prince that said they made like 150 of them, so not too many people got them, but. Yeah, I always thought that would be pretty cool. Something like that. It has like, for those that don't know what I'm talking about, it has like a, kind of like you have with if you're a backcountry like hiker or something like that. A lot of people carry like a Garmin beacon. So if they like break their leg, you don't have any cell phone service. You just activate the beacon and it'll send an SOS signal out over the whatever the band is that you guys use as pilots, that open air band, and they'll basically get someone to come help rescue you. And so they had these watches made that had a beacon in it that could be activated.
Yeah, he's a smart guy, man. He's got a phone out now that he's trying to sell. I don't know the details, but I think it doesn't spy on you, and that type of thing is kind of what he's trying to push. This a personal phone that you can use on the whatever cellular networks, but he makes it. Erik Prince makes it.
Did you ever meet him?
Oh yeah, several times. When I graduated, the second training class that they had, that was they called it Blackwater Academy. It was kind of a catch-all training course that would supposedly qualify you for every program that they were looking at. So he was trying to have this plug and play. An infantry, what he wanted was an infantry battalion of guys that he could plug and play around the world And so he standardized training and everything, driving, everything. And I went to the second class. So he came around and shook everybody's hand that graduated. And if you got time for a quick story, and I may have told this last time, I can't remember, but very personable guy. I mean, he's a former SEAL team guy, so he's been around. He likes being around manly men, but he comes from money, and he doesn't get along with those people. Is kind of what I gather. Well, he's a lead from the front kind of guy. And I can't remember who it was, but we came back. We were on. I was on the Mambas. That was my first job. It's a big armored South African vehicle, and we would drive up and down Route Irish, take people to the airport before we got helicopter support. But you pick up supplies, food, water, ammo, and people. And we were coming back, and we lived in he was renting a house for us, a couple of houses in the green zone. And we had local security guards and stuff, but a relatively secure compound. But anyway, we had a bunch of MRE boxes stacked up. Well, man, you come back from a run on Route Irish, man, and you don't get blown up or killed, man. That's a win, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody's all motivated, coming in. And there's this dude in there, man, kind of like stacking boxes, trying to clean up the place, trying to help out. And he bends over to grab a box of MREs. And I forgot who did it, man. I'll think of it before the end of the episode. Just a kind of a loud, brazen dude, man. He double fists this guy's ass. He just grabs this guy's ass. He's like, "You got a great ass. What have you been feeding it, cock?" And the guy stands up and turns around and he's like, "Hey, I'm Erik." It was Erik Prince, man, the owner of the company, man. Billionaire, man. And they're stacking MREs, and this guy double fist his ass cheeks, man. So that was pretty funny to see.
He's got a people like either love him or hate him kind of thing out there. You know what I'm saying? Like, sure. Does he even live in the U.S. anymore?
He's over in UAE, I think, right next door to us.
I know when the piracy thing was going on off the coast of Africa, he was talking about building a small navy to help protect, the shipping lanes and stuff like that through there. And he like gets involved with these like, he's all about contracting, right? He's all about building like these little armies for different things and stuff. And obviously some people are cool with that and some people aren't. I guess it depends on if it's supporting their cause or not, if they like him or not. But
he's very much about efficiency because he sees so much inefficiency in government. And man, I could talk about this for hours. A lot of times these companies that are efficient get bad raps. I think it's counterintelligence from people who are making money. Like for example, Executive Outcomes went into Sierra Leone. I want to say I can't remember if it was the 60s, 70s, or the 80s. But they went in there with about I want to say an 800 to 1,200 man force, and they defeated this rebel army within 30 days with 1,200 men or less. Now, that same situation had been a stalemate for a decade with like 5,000 government troops. Mm-hmm. So now somebody I'm sure was making money and, the bureaucracy and this, that, and the other, but they wanted to keep the 5,000 troops there. Well, and I don't know the whole story, but Executive Outcomes was like, hey, look, if you want to end this civil war, we can do it. We can do it with, 1,200 guys. So the 5,000 guys couldn't do it. The 1,200 guys could do it. They went in within 30 days and they solved the problem, and that's efficiency. The problem is once you start dealing with some of these people high on the food chain who run governments or who are high up the food chain in a government, they're getting money from that job. Like you don't want to solve a problem because now you've eliminated your job, if you will.
Yeah.
So I think that's where a lot of the hatred of Erik Prince comes from. He could probably replace a lot of those bureaucracies, just using common sense,
Yeah, I guess as an example, like you mentioned before, if a vehicle got broke, you have to contact KBR, get it convoyed over, have them work, probably fill out a bunch of paperwork, wait on them to get the parts and stuff. Whereas, or you could bring in a flat of coffee or a couple handles of Jack and be like, hey, can you take care of this? And it gets taken care of, without all the bureaucratic red tape. I mean, I don't think anybody is unaware of the military industrial complex that we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, when you show up to like a base and they have a Burger King and a fucking Pizza Hut, it's like, what are we doing here? Like, where we're so established, we have fast food joints, like multiple coffee shops. I remember, did you go to Afghanistan at all?
I did. Yeah.
So if you were on Bastion, they had a place. I remember going over there one time. They had a place on it called The Blue, I think. It was like a steakhouse on the fucking base, and they had like dance nights and shit like this.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, what the hell? I mean, I wasn't on Bastion. I was only I would only be passing through, but I saw that, and I'm like, what the hell is this? Are we fighting a war here? Or like, and I get it. You want to like improve troop morale and shit, but I think a good way to improve troop morale is to not be in a country for 20 fucking years. You know what I'm saying? Like, get in and get out. Like having all that. Yeah. Having all that kind of stuff set up is, I don't know, man. And I think it probably, honestly, I think people that only were on like a big base, like Bastion and stuff, they probably questioned, like, what am I doing here? Like, I get up, I go do my office job, I go get coffee at the coffee shop, I go to the PX and I could buy a TV and like, I don't know. It's, so yeah, there's definitely a lot of people that stand to lose money if these wars are like fought quickly and efficiently. It's, it's such a crazy business.
Yeah. Absolutely right.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's so, I don't know. And I don't know what we can do about it because so many people in high positions of government make money off these things that, I don't know. It's just such a wild, to me, it's so wild. I remember because my first deployment was to Iraq and I was a mechanic at the time. So I was on TQ, Al Taqaddum Air Base the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
And that was relatively good living because we had a chow hall. I mean, we had a shitty little PX that was like really small and it had like 3-month-old magazines and like, stuff like that. But like compared to guys that were out in the cities and fighting and stuff, like we had it, we were living in luxury. And even I was sitting here like, man, this fucking sucks. Like, this isn't what I signed up for. I remember one time, one of the guys that was with us, we had half our unit at maintenance battalion. When you deploy, half the unit came from the reserve side. They'd activate a bunch of reservist mechanics and then attach them to your unit. And I remember one of the guys complaining because the Wi-Fi wasn't working in his can or something like, it was either the Wi-Fi or the air conditioning. And I'm like, bro, we're in Iraq. Are you fucking serious? Like, there's dudes out there fighting and you're bitching about your Wi-Fi not working. Man. Like, what are we doing here? It's pretty wild, man.
We had when I went over to the special programs, we had something everywhere, but there was this one particular place in Baghdad, and we had I think we had like 2 dessert chefs I mean, they treated us nice, man. There's no doubt. I'm never going to speak ill about the guys, but I remember there was a guy. He was kind of he was a team guy. I think he did like 6 years. He got out because the contract boom was happening. And, man, he had been there about a year off and on. And I think we were out of like chocolate covered strawberries in the the chow hall, the little buffet, the fruit buffet thing, whatever.
Yeah.
And man, he just went high and to the right, bro. I mean, it was like 6:30 in the morning, man. He's just coming out of the gym or whatever. And by God, his only purpose in life was to get these chocolate covered strawberries. And we were out. And like, dude, I'm telling you, man, he had a freaking conniption right there. And we're all looking at him. And at first we're like, yeah, man, what the fuck, man? We should have chocolate covered strawberries. Why are we out? And then it's like, dude, we're in the middle of Iraq and we're bitching about chocolate covered strawberries. Yeah. Man, we need to maybe, kind of reassess that.
I've been on both sides. I've been, like I said, I was a TQ, which had a DFAC, and for those that don't know, those are like established chow halls with TCNs, these third country nationals that come in. I think mostly Indian dudes that work there as cooks. And you have steak night every week, steak and lobster night every week. They had Mongolian barbecue night every week. you had like Baskin Robbins ice cream, like the pralines ice cream was the one I always got if I got any. And like that kind of living. And then I did a deployment to Sangin as an Afghan advisor, and we were living in these like dirt huts basically, and we would get one scoop of fucking food out of like the tray rats, you know what I'm saying, where they boil them, and it's basically a big ass MRE. I remember starving and Sangin, and but I honestly, that deployment was so much better than the one where I had all the luxuries, because the one where I had all the luxuries, I was kind of like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, I don't feel like I'm in the war. I don't feel like I'm like, what is my role here? You know, and as a mechanic, it's hard sometimes to, you are definitely having an effect because you're keeping trucks running. Sure. We were upgrading MRAPs. We were putting new turrets, and we were doing stuff like that. So it was definitely a positive impact, but it's like, I'm not out there in it and seeing the end state of the work and what's going on and kind of feeling the effects of the war. Whereas as an Afghan advisor in Sangin, it was like, I'm directly involved with these guys. We're going out on missions together. We're getting shot at together. We're living miserably together. And, but I see the mission and I feel like I'm doing my job. And, you know, I don't know. It was just two different sides of the coin there. And I really liked living the Spartan living. You know, I had the prison gym set up with like chains and shit. Yeah. I don't know. It's just it's two different worlds, man. I don't know. And I'm sure a lot of people out there have had that same kind of experience that did multiple deployments, but I don't know. The military industrial complex thing, I see why we need some of it, you know, because especially when you're talking about equipment and stuff like that, because you're constantly wanting innovation and new equipment and better equipment. Sometimes I think we over innovate, you know, and I think we make stuff that's too technologically dependent, you know, like stuff can easily be broken, can easily become no longer usable, and it's highly expensive gear.
I agree.
But I also know what it's like, again, like being in Sangin and not having some stuff where it's like, man, I really wish we had better food. You know, I wish I wasn't eating 2 MREs a day or whatever it was, because there's only 24 meals in those boxes. So this is getting old real fast, but yeah, it's crazy, dude. When you were with, you were with Blackwater what were like, did you guys eat at the defects and stuff in like Ramadi, or was there a defect? Like what were your living conditions there as a contractor?
Yeah. When I first got to the team house in Baghdad, we had a local cook and, we just ate what they gave us, you know, because you were in transit status there. So it was like, hey man, you only get 2 meals a day, but you know, you're going to go to a team somewhere. When I got to Al Hilla, it was, we had our own, there was a defect down there for the embassy. So, you know, again, you're kind of working for the embassy. And then when I got to Ramadi, we were kind of guests of the Marines. We were considered the State Department, but we didn't have like a big, huge compound. We were just kind of, because Ramadi, man, it was like, you know, real estate was at a premium, and nobody wanted to go there, honestly. Only the Marines, you know, would go to a place like fucking Ramadi. So we were guests of the Marines, and we ate at the DFAC in Ramadi.
It's crazy. Even in a place like that, they can have a DFAC going.
Yeah.
Imagine being one of those TCNs that gets sent and you're like, where am I at? I'm in Ramadi, and like shit's happening all the time and there's nothing. You're just there to fucking make food. Like what a shock that would be. Oh yeah, man. Yep. I told a story in the book about a guy. He was it was in Ramadi. He was a technical guy. I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly, but he was supposed to go around and set up these cameras, and they were going to help us monitor, you know, kind of like an outer layer of security. But it was Ramadi, man. So you had to wear body armor and all this type of stuff, you know, and he's not really sure what's going on. He just sees me and this guy named Pat Bablick going out with him. Interesting guy, man. A lot of funny stories about Pat. Anyway, we're out there, man, and, you know, man, it's Ramadi, man. But we've been here, you know, several years at this point, man. And it's weird what the brain gets used to.
And man, there was a massive explosion, man. I mean, it looked nuclear, bro. I think somebody drove into a gas station and cooked off an IED. And man, it probably killed 20 people, man. I mean, it was just crazy shit you see there. And me and Pat looked at it, like, man, that's pretty crazy, huh? And then we went back to telling stories, because we're just kind of taking this guy around so he can do his set up these cameras. We're sitting there and I'm listening to one of Pat's stories, man. Man, he had the funniest stories. Anyway, here comes the tech, right? He's running towards us, man, Mach speed. And it had been several seconds since the explosion. So our brains have not come to the conclusion that he's running because the explosion's done in our mind, like, oh, let's focus on something else. Let's tell stories. So we're freaking out that this guy's freaking out. We're like, man, what's going on, right? He runs over and he's like, what the hell was that? And I didn't know what he was talking about. I was like, what the hell was what? And then Pat's like, hey, Kirk, I think he's talking about the explosion. And I was like, oh, well, welcome to Ramadi. And he quit right there. He's like, fuck, I'm done, bro. Fuck this shit. He got in the car and he was like, he's like, I ain't fucking getting out. Fuck this. And I was like, okay, well, hey man, I get it, man. All right. Well, I guess we're done for the day. He literally quit, man. But man, and I'm not shitting on those guys, man. That's not really what a lot of people signed up for. Now, me and you would be like, man, that's crazy. Some people like, man, fuck this, it is what it is, man,
Yeah.
But,
it's crazy how when you're in a place like that, you get so accustomed to like, oh man, then it's like, anyways, like not my problem. Like I'm not involved. So someone's going to deal with that. I remember when I was in Sangan, me and my buddy, John Isley were sitting there, and I think it was John that I was sitting with. And, they made like a mini car bomb on like a moped basically and put it in the bazaar in Sangan, which was right out not too far from our camp. And we just hear the boom. And I'm like, oh shit. Like that was an IED. But then like, I think I was playing Xbox or something. Then it was like, all right, well back to the game, cause like I'm not involved, that's not my, it's No, I totally get it, man. If you show up and you're like, because some of these contract jobs are kind of vague in their description.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't know anything, like a lot of military guys get it. You get out, you read the description, and you see the pay, and you're like, that's high pay. This must be a really shitty area. Whereas a dude off the street that may just be, like you said, a technology specialist. Like we had guys that worked the bats and hides, the ID stuff, and if they don't know anything about, they've never been in the military and they're like, yeah, I'll do this contract, and they get sent over. I mean, they know they're going to a war zone, but it's hard to imagine like you're probably told along the way, like, oh, you're pretty safe. You're going to be on base the whole time and da-da-da-da-da. So something like that occurs. You're like, oh, what the hell is this? This is not worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Oh God.
When when you finished contracting, you moved on to, what do you call it? I mean, I wouldn't say it's special mission unit, but what kind of organization? How would you describe it?
Yeah, it's a lot of people have said special mission unit because it's military terminology and that's the easiest way to explain it. It was called the special programs, and you were always co-located with one of the military special mission units, almost exclusively. It depended on where you go, but yeah, that's where I moved on to after Ramadi.
Now, a lot of those guys, I guess the way it works is to meet like some of the, was it Title IX or one of those title like restrictions, they would kind of, like ominous dominus, you tier 1 operator, you are now part of this group so that you can go legally do whatever it is that we are going to go have you do. Isn't that kind of how it works when you work with those guys?
That's exactly right. We all got we got diplomatic passports, which were real. And then we got a bunch of different fake IDs. I don't know if I sent you the Captain Phil McCracken when I was in somewhere in Afghanistan, but it's an ISAF badge. And it's a legitimate badge. But when you look at the bottom, it says Captain Phil McCracken. And that was literally my ID wherever I went, man. I was Captain Phil McCracken on that particular deployment. But you would have an actual diplomatic passport to kind of get you through a lot of trouble or a lot of problems. It didn't solve every problem, but it solved a lot. And then you had the official fake IDs, that because you didn't want with ISAF, with any coalition, man, you're doing shit that you don't want everybody to know about, even your partnered countries, because not all of them need to know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to assume that people were collecting on you, and you had shit, depending on how far it went, but you had things like cover stories and cover for action, cover for status, I think it was the phrase. But that's just people you kind of interact with. But then there were people that you were working with, and they may come from like the SAS, the British and the Australian SAS. I worked with them, the CanSoft guys. There's a guy, he has I believe he has the world record for the longest sniper kill.
Oh yeah.
He was in I think he was in Kandahar with us in 2005 or 6. And I didn't know that the Canadians had a tier 1 unit, man. And man, these guys were just super squared away, and they were always doing crazy shit.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very good to us because at this particular time, we were, on the one hand, it's good to be below the radar, and we were pretty far below the radar. Unfortunately, we were too far in this particular case, and the U.S. military aviation wouldn't support us. They're like, we don't know who you are, and it's like, well, I can't really tell you who we are, and we're like, we're not giving you helicopters. But they would support the Canadians tier 1 unit, so we worked a drug deal with them. They would give us 4 seats on every Chinook that came in to support them. They would give us 4 seats, so we could kind of plan logistically speaking. Hey man, a bird's coming in on Tuesday. Do we have anybody that needs to go over to CAF or something like that? Because when you're talking about the VBIDs, my buddy Don. Headshot Don Bradley, he got blown up a week before I got to Kandahar, and it was they were doing an admin move because we didn't have enough helicopters and they wouldn't support us, and he got T-boned by a car bomb. It detonated, it blew him over on his side. Now they all lived, but that was just another example of what can happen, man, if people find out who you are, man.
Yeah, and I think the Canadian one is JTF2. That's
it. Yep.
I had one of their guys on. I'll have to look and see. I had one of the JTF guys on, not the one. He was also a sniper. Jeff
Dallas
DePati.
Okay.
Episode 184. Okay. I probably said his last name wrong. Sorry, Jeff, if you hear this. I'm so bad. DePati. Who knows? But that's so interesting. Like walking around with all these. I mean, if you get caught and you're rolling around with multiple IDs, that's obviously not good news, right? Do you have, when you're working in that kind of, I guess when you're working like that, how far does diplomatic immunity carry for you? Because you could easily be charged with like espionage and, taken to some dark hole and fucking thrown in there,
Yeah, absolutely. We did have one guy get rolled up, and he did, I think, 9 months in a Pakistani prison.
Ooh.
I can't remember his name now. I could see his face. But he got rolled up in somewhere in Pakistan, and he tried to do the hey man, diplomatic passport. I worked for the embassy, and the story I heard, and I can't confirm this or haven't confirmed this, but the story I heard was because I actually went to SEER school after this, and I think they talked about it in SEER school, but he stuck to his cover story and everything, man. He had the diplomatic passport, and he was like, hey, I work with computers. I'm an advisor to the U.S. Embassy. And I think they were going to let him roll. And the story I heard was that they did a Google search on his name and came up like on his Facebook profile. And his girlfriend was like, hey, my boyfriend's a Green Beret and he works for the CIA and he's going to kill those motherfuckers or something like that. So like, oh, really? You're a fucking computer guy, huh? So he did 9 months in in prison in Pakistan, and eventually they negotiated him out. And there's been other I'll say that because it's open source. There's been other stuff that's happened.
Knowing that kind of thing happens, when you see a news story about an American that's like supposedly a contractor or a tourist that gets captured in another country that's being held, does it make you question why they were actually there?
Absolutely.
Are you like, I don't know if this dude actually is a tourist, or I don't know if he is or whatever?
Yeah, it's and I'm not saying everybody's lying or what. I'm just saying it does make me question it, man. Absolutely makes me question it.
That's so crazy. I mean, working in an environment like that and with a group like that probably makes you question a lot of things that you're told, like by official sources. I mean, even being in the military, having had access to like secret stuff and just not even access to secret stuff, but like being on operations and seeing being talked about on the news and them getting it wrong and being like, that's not what happened, or that's not how it went. Like, what are they talking about? Knowing like, I don't know. It's so weird. Like that's one thing I do kind of miss. It's kind of being where you're like, you got the peek behind the curtain. You kind of know what's happening. You kind of know, I don't know. It's a weird way to think about stuff after you've, and I'm not saying like there's all kinds of espionage and all this, like, everything is a I mean, there is, right? There's quite a bit. It's hard to say. But not everything is a conspiracy, or not everything that conspiracy theorists believe is true and stuff like that. A lot of it, because we overclassify stuff in the military, a lot of stuff that's just completely ridiculous gets some legs underneath it because nobody will come out and deny it because of whatever. Right. I don't know. I always thought like a lot of the stuff that's classified is just like, why is this classified? Why can't we tell people about this? Or why, even down the road, like 5 years later, why can't this be discussed? Like the American taxpayers are paying for this or whatever. I mean, obviously like sources and methods and stuff like that are secret for a reason. But I don't know. Some of the stuff is just kind of ridiculous. But yeah, I could see how working in an environment like you were, where it probably makes you question a lot of stuff. You're like,
Oh yeah, man.
And again, you don't even know. Like, you can't even be like, oh yeah, I'm sure that guy was a tourist, or I'm sure that was the official story is correct.
Everything is compartmentalized for one thing. So even if you do know the truth, you only know the truth about one particular very small event. I played a very small part in recovering a Stinger missile in 2000. I think it was 6 or 7, and we were just told to go buy this missile. That's what we were told to do, and we weren't watching the news just because of the place where we were. But like I said, I played a very small part in it, but I was involved, me and 2 other guys. And I was like, fucking cool, man. We just bought a Stinger missile, man. That's fucking crazy. Well, years later, I found out that was almost, I can't say 100%, but we probably bought the Stinger that shot down Flipper 75. And like I said, I didn't know this. The military covered it up, but they're admitting it now. Flipper 75 was a Chinook that was shot down by an American Stinger missile, and it's the first confirmed shoot down of an American aircraft by an American missile. They traced the missile back to the Afghan war in I want to say 1982 is the lot number. So everyone killed on this aircraft were killed by a Stinger missile that was provided to the Afghans by the Americans. And that was the first time it happened. It wasn't the last. The second time, I can't remember the call sign, but it was the latest generation Stinger, and instead of exploding near it, it's kind of like a shotgun blast is the idea behind missiles. Well, the latest generation Stinger was actually so good it went right into the engine, and the engine ate it because the engines are made out of titanium. So actually that was a good thing. And the second Chinook was able to make it back on one engine, so no one died. But that was the second confirmed shoot down of an American aircraft by an American missile. And I have my own theories about Turbine 33, which is Red Wings. And I'm not saying I know this to be a fact, but it may have been. I wonder if it was a Stinger missile that shot him down and not an SA-7. And that's a whole nother conversation. But
well, some people even say that it was an RPG. You know, there's a lot of debate out there, again, amongst us non TS SCI holders and read into that kind of thing. Someone knows, obviously, but there's a lot of like people that think that it was a lucky shot of an RPG. I've heard people say, I had Ed Derrick on, who wrote Victory Point, which is kind of like the rest of the story behind Lone Survivor. And he covers that extensively as well. He's got a couple books about all of that. And Operation Red Wings and everything. I think he also said that a lot of people know that it was not. I could be wrong. We talk about it in our interview. People have to go back and look.
No,
but SA-7 was also brought up.
Yeah, he did talk about that.
What's the flipper flight? What was that one? What was the call sign? I don't even remember that.
Yeah, and nobody does. And they covered it up for many years. Flipper 75. And it's at the point now where you can Google it or web search it and you can find out the details. But the Pentagon covered that up for many years. And so when we got the missile, and like I said, I can't say for sure but I was told, hey man, this is the one that got that Chinook. I didn't even know a Chinook had been shot down. Like I said, everyone is very compartmentalized over on that side. They just kind of give you a mission and you go do it. But
what year was it shot down? Do you know?
06, I believe it was. Yeah, I think it was 06, 2006.
I'll have to look that up. I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, flipper. Yeah, and no one does. But it was covered up, and then the Pentagon admitted to it. You can find it, but they're not advertising it, if that makes sense. So, like we were saying, you know, not everything's a conspiracy, but aren't advertising, and you know, there's a lot of stuff out there.
Now, when you say you bought that missile, do you mean the spent, like the actual before it was shot, or just the okay?
No, so a man pad has a launcher and a battery, and then you put a missile inside of it. That's the Stinger missile, or that's any SA-7 or whatever. That's how it works. And there was a lot of disinformation, which was easily disproven years later in the Syrian civil war. But at the time, there was a lot of disinformation being spread to the military that don't worry about the Stingers because the battery life is only 10 years. Well, that's not true. And you can get on a number of video sites. I don't know if they're still on YouTube, but I used to watch the ones of the Syrian civil war where they would take a motorcycle battery and connect it to the SA-7, whose battery had, the life was, like I said, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the battery shelf life is. It was beyond that, but they would hook these motorcycle batteries to it and give it just enough, because it's just looking for electrical current to spin the nitrogen in a seeker. So it doesn't matter if it's a year old or 10 years old or I think 30 years old at that particular time, 2006, 1982, do the math, whatever, 25 years. But there's a lot of disinformation out there, like, oh, don't worry about Stingers because the batteries won't work. Well, that was false.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's one I've never even heard about. I'll have to look into that. I'm sure we'll get some comments with people that have some details that have been researching. Sure. But who was on that flight? Do you know? Was it just a regular flight? Was it a special operations flight, or?
That I'm not sure. I think there were some Brits and a military working dog team on board. And I think it was, my first guess is some guys from the 82nd, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure if they were going on a raid or if it was like like a ring route or something. Mm-hmm. Because Chinooks were used for everything in Afghanistan because those are the only ones that had the power to get over the mountains.
Yeah, what do we call those? Not transit flights, but like you said, like a ring route. It's basically, for those that don't know, that's like, hey, Flipper 75, if that's the call sign, you're going to be flying from Kandahar to Bastion to freaking so on, and you're basically just hitting all these bases and taking people from one place to another, and that's what they do. There's like a schedule, there's like a regular schedule for that, so that people that need to move around the country to do certain things can move to different places. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, man, that's intriguing. I'm definitely gonna have to look. What's it like to be involved in something like that, where you've purchased, like, that's some like movie shit, right? Like where you're out undercover buying Stinger missile parts.
Yeah, and we didn't know what. Again, they're very compartmentalized. They were just like, hey man, go. This is your mission today, type of thing. We didn't know about the Chinook being shot down, and we didn't get this information. I can't remember when we found out or when we heard through the grapevine. But so you don't always know what you're doing when you're doing it. And that's just the way that game is played. You try to get as much information as you can, but I think it was such a high priority because the military was worried that people would find out that they lost an American aircraft to an American missile. I think that was kind of because I remember that day, man, just everything stopped. They're like, hey man, come to the team room, get everybody in here. We got to brief some shit. And we were close to the Iranian border, so I thought it was more aligned with the Iranians, but it wasn't, or it might have been. I don't know, but they were just like, "Hey, man, you got to make this shit happen today. This is the highest priority today." And I was like, "Yeah, Roger that." So
you say that you go into some of these missions and you don't really have all the info. Do you feel like do you ever feel like you're being put on like maybe a suicide mission? Like, do you feel safe? Obviously, there's a known level of danger all the time when you're doing these kind of operations. But do you feel like that the safeties that could be put in place are in place when you're going out and doing these? Or are you just hoping that, someone out there is looking out for you, kind of deal?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. On some level, man, you do kind of wonder. What I will tell you, I can't talk about the selection process or anything, but you do go through a selection process, and you have to be vetted. Someone on the program has to say, they have to vouch for you in such a way that you're worthy of being taken a chance on, and then you go through the selection process, and it's not always physical. It's not always like road marches or whatever. There's a lot of shooting, but there's a lot of psychological stuff, a lot of scenarios and questions. But they tell you early on, because it's all the tier 1 guys that run the selection, and it used to be, and it still is, a tier 1 mission. But during GWAT, they didn't have enough guys that could do the mission, so they had to say, we need to create our own unit that can do just that mission. And then we do the raids, the raids and the hostage rescues and stuff. But they kind of tell you early on, man, they're like, look, this is the highest threat. It's also the highest pay, but it's the highest threat mission you can get into on this side of the fence. And some guys walked away from it after a trip, and I never faulted those guys, but they kind of tell you up front, they're like, hey man, air support. And like when I went to Kandahar, man, we didn't have any air support. We were driving out through the mountains in the middle of the night, man. And if we would have got caught, man, it would have been, you're done. But they kind of tell you up front, and you just have to kind of ask yourself, is this what I want to do? Because they're pretty upfront about it, man. They're like, hey man, you're absolutely fucking hanging it out there, man. And we get it if you don't want to be here. And not everybody stayed. Even if they made the selection process, not everybody stayed.
Yeah, you talk about like rolling through Kandahar at night or wherever, rolling through anywhere in Afghanistan. I mean, you could get stopped by a Taliban checkpoint or something. In that kind of situation, is it just fight your way out of it? And I mean, are you able to contact a QRF or anything, or is it just, hey, dude, you're on your own, man?
It depends, man. Yeah, we were on our own. And I guess I shouldn't say where, but we were on our own. And then in certain places, if you could, and if it, like if you were in a safe house, you're not going to have a QRF. But if you're on a base somewhere, then you can build a local QRF. There were places where we had vetted local nationals as our QRF, and you're like, man, I hope they want our money more than the Taliban money, man, because there's only 2 of us, so there's only 4 of us, But a lot of times, man, like when you rolled out, man, you had a vehicle that was capable of damn near doing surgery on somebody. I mean, you had med gear, you had water, you had so much fucking ammo, man. Holy shit. You wouldn't want to try it, but you could hold off a small army, man, for sure. You hope it never got to that, because that's if everything's working, right? What if you're injured? What if you're shot? I wasn't there when it happened, but we had a guy, they blew through a checkpoint. It just happened to be a legitimate checkpoint, but they weren't wearing uniforms, and it was a perfect storm. But they blasted through it, man, and they just got the shit shot out of them. Well, rounds went through the vehicle because, again, it's armored, but it's not armored forever if you're shooting at it with machine guns. Mm-hmm. And he had a round go through his leg. And eventually the vehicle went down, right? And you're just, 1 or 2 guys in a car. I mean, you could be the best dude in the world, man. You're 2 guys facing 10, 20 guys. I mean, the odds are not in your favor. So the vehicle went down, and they were trying to E&E, and they grabbed a saw and a grenade launcher, and it's starting to get dark, and they get behind this like little berm. Well, it's 2 guys, man, and an interpreter. And he puts on he sees that he's shot and he's bleeding, and he tells the other guy, like, hey man, I'm shot. Well, the guy he's losing consciousness. So the guy tells the interpreter, hey man, put a fucking tourniquet on the guy, and fucking I'll hold off this group. They didn't know who it was. Well, eventually they got more or less overrun by these guys, and it was just like, fuck man, we're done. Here we go. And then they realized it was a green on blue situation, and they de-escalated. Mm. The guy bled to death because the interpreter was scared and didn't know how to use a tourniquet, and he didn't put the tourniquet on like he had been instructed. So here's an example of, I mean, you're just out there on your own, man. I'll say his name is Greg Wright, and I'm sure you can find his name online or something. But man, it was just a perfect storm. It was just one of those things, man, that, nobody's coming for you, and you really have to, not everybody's comfortable with that. And I'm not saying I'm not better than anybody or anything like that, but I had been on the big teams in the State Department, and I felt like I was a sitting duck. I would much rather sneak around, man, and just try to go where someone least expects me to go. Yeah. So it worked for me, but it didn't work for everybody,
Obviously the missions are extremely dangerous. In a situation like that, when someone gets killed, do we ever hear about that? Or is that like name on the wall, star on the wall at the CIA or something, That's one of those things you just don't. Does their family even find out what happened to them a lot of times?
Usually not.
It's just a very generic, not. Hey, he was killed during an operation kind of deal. No details.
Yeah. Because today is like the digital age. It's hard to keep secrets now.
Yeah.
When Scott Roberson was killed in the Coast, that was it made international news. That was the deadliest day in the intelligence community in history. I think they lost 9 people in one suicide bomb. And
was that when they were bringing in what they thought was an asset, and they were trying to get info on Bin Laden's location?
That was it. Yep, Balawi. Yeah, and he had been overruled. He was with me in Ramadi. He actually, I don't know if I told him, I put it in the book. I was a bouncer because I couldn't get a job anywhere, and the bartender comes up to me one day and he's like, "Hey man, that guy over there is buying drugs, man. You got to throw him the fuck out of here. We'll lose our license." He was a pretty jacked up dude, and I didn't want to fight this guy. So I go over to him, man. I put my hand on him. I'm like, "Hey, brother, time to call it a night," you know. And if he would have done anything squirrely, I was going to choke him out, right? Well, he goes out. I never saw him again. I'm like, you know, hey, man, that was, you know, whooped him again, Josie. A couple years later in the team room in Ramadi, it's the fucking guy, right? I'm like, hey, man, where do I know you from? He's like, you threw me out of a bar in fucking Atlanta. I'm like, what the fuck? He was an undercover narcotics agent. So he was in there buying drugs as part of his cover, and he just happened to get seen or whatever. Well, that was Scott Roberson, and he was the team leader in Coast. And and a lot of experience, man. Guy had a lot of experience. All those guys did. And this was a case of someone chasing that next rung on the ladder. And, you know, SOP's written in blood, man. And everybody had experience, and everybody said no, but they were overruled by the commander. You know, the commander was like, hey, you're all a bunch of fucking contractors. You work for me or whatever. And they all got killed, you know, because of that decision. So
yeah, because the decision was they didn't want to offend them, right? So they weren't doing like full searches of them or their vehicles. And that one time they just brought in an explosive and blew them up right there at the gate or something like that. Fuck, man.
Inside the compound, man. Yeah,
that's crazy, dude. It's so crazy to think you went from being a bouncer at a bar to doing all this crazy. Did you ever imagine that's the you know, the path your life would take?
No fucking way. I mean, yes and no. I was so mad that I was a bouncer, because it was like after the first year, I got a lot of stuff out of my system. But after the first year, it's like, okay, I need to be in my career. I'm a Force Recon Marine. I got a college education. I got a pilot's license. I speak pretty decent Spanish. Why am I not where I'm supposed to be? You know, so I was pretty pissed off. But when I finally got out of the business, it was like, holy shit, look what I'm doing now, man. I mean, 6 months ago, I was breaking up fights for $10 an hour, and now I'm carrying a machine gun. So
careful what you ask for also, you know.
Careful what you ask for, man. A cautionary tale.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep, cautionary tale.
You know, I think a lot of guys that get out of the military, to go back to what you were talking about being a bouncer and stuff, there's a lot of guys that get out of the military and expect that with their whatever technical experience that they gained while they're in the military, whatever prestige that comes from being a veteran and the discipline that comes with that they're going to have probably a pretty easy time finding the job that they want to do when they get out. And that's not always the case. How do you keep from going down a dark road? Because it took you a long time to get to do what you wanted to do, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. Yeah. That's, I definitely went down dark roads, man, many, many, many times. I was one paycheck away from being homeless many times. I remember I didn't have a car at one point. I got off the train. It's called the MARTA train. It was too late at night for the buses to run, so I had to walk back to my apartment. And I remember seeing these homeless guys underneath the overpass, the bridge. And I was like, man, with all of my credentials and all of my training, I'm one paycheck away from being one of those guys, man. And you're just like, what did I do wrong, man? Who did I piss off? You just, yeah, man, you can really get into some dark thoughts.
You start blaming yourself. Like, what is it, me? Am I a problem? Like, why can't it? Even when you get credentialed, because you were in college, right? You got a degree and everything, and it's still, I mean, I'll tell people for real, like, I've looked for jobs before and just don't ever get a response. And it's like, dude, what the fuck am I doing wrong? And you start questioning, like, am I a piece of shit? How am I coming off? Like, I'm not even getting a call back on 40 resumes getting submitted. I don't even get a call back,
Yeah. Oh, I know, man. Yeah, absolutely. No, man, it's the civilian life was the toughest thing in my life, man. It absolutely, man. It's, and I'm not downplaying people's military service or anything, but it's like, dude, if you want to get your nuts crushed, man, try civilian life, man. It's just fucking, you get your ass kicked, man, 10 times a day. I mean, it's tough, man.
I think it's a hard pill to swallow for some people too, because it's like, most of the time you can get a job, but it's not going to be
Sure.
a job that you want to do. Like you went
Mm-hmm.
and you were a bouncer for a long time. I
Mm-hmm.
doubt you wanted to be a fucking 30-year-old bouncer or
Right,
something
man.
like that. You know what I'm saying? Like that's usually like a college kid or someone, you know, that's doing a gig like
Yeah,
that or
man.
someone.
Oh yeah, man.
But it's like,
Oh yeah.
when you look back, you're like, I get why some guys get super depressed or become homeless or whatever, because they're like, you know, in the military, you had like this cool job. You were, maybe if you were good at your job, you were well respected and people wanted your opinion, and, you know, you had a mission and everybody was working towards that mission. And then you get out and that's all gone, along with all the support structure. You know, I'm in Afghanistan. I don't worry about where the food's coming from. It's coming. Someone's bringing us food. You know what I'm saying? Like it's going to be there. The paycheck is going to get deposited. You know, those are things you just don't even consider because that's part of the whole gig. And then you get out and all of that is gone. And now it's like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. You're exactly right. I mean, you're 100% right. You know.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can see why it affects guys.
yeah, it's I just thought it's so interesting how you went from, like I said, being a bouncer to like working out buying Stinger missiles at foreign lands.
Oh yeah, man.
You know, like that's just such a crazy like what a trip, right? And I guess it's reinforces that you never know what the next door is going to open. You know, the next door that you open, what's going to come with that, and it may be everything you wanted, it might not be, but you got to be kind of flexible to work in something like that. So I don't know. Is there anything else that you could talk about from your time working on these special missions?
Man, I just really loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I get, you know, if you had specific questions or something, man, I had a great time. I loved it. I was very proud of what I got to do because you got to see firsthand the efforts of the fruit of your labors, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But man, you get used, and again, man, you get used to this autonomy and responsibility, and like we didn't have support. Like, you know, maybe there's no QRF, but man, we had our own satellite, bro. Nobody has their own We had our own satellite. We had our own. I can't say the name of it, but we had our own transportation airplanes from stateside over, and it was all business class, bro. I mean, it was they took care of you, man. You knew you were at the top of the food chain. That was about as good as it was ever going to get, unless you won the lottery. And even then, I mean, it was just great. I loved it. I loved the people. Holy shit, man! I just had a great time. It was absolutely what I wanted to do, what I'd always wanted to do. I did it for 12 years. Like I said, not every day was, you know, like a gunfight or something, but man, I got to do some awesome stuff. Met incredible people, learned a lot. And
What's the downtime like? You know, you say you're not in a gunfight every day. Obviously, you're getting paid well, you're getting treated well, and because of that, they're going to use you when they need you.
Sure.
What is it like? Is it like, you know, we got used to in the global war on terror, these rotations of deployments, like 7-month outs, come back, or Rangers go out for like 3 months and come back and then go back out again.
Yeah.
Do you guys have like a deployment schedule, or is it just like, hey, Bobby, this thing came up, we got to take you?
Yeah, it's each person. So you had either the federal employee or the active military guy. Then you had what's called a direct contractor, which meant you were contracted directly for that organization, and they controlled your schedule. Or you could be an industrial contractor, which is what I did, and you get to pick your schedule, but you're the first one to go if there's budget issues. I always usually did 60/60s because I like to plan for that, and that was kind of the standard deployment. Because the op tempo was so high, you couldn't go over, I think it was 90 days. They would cut you off at 90 days. Now, if it was like,
That's so
the end
crazy.
of the world, the end of the world or something, they could extend you to 100 days. But I didn't know anyone who was extended beyond 90 days. I would normally do 60 days. Now, I did a 29-day trip. I've done 45-day trips. but usually they like 60-60, and I loved 60-60, man. That was a good mix.
With a weird schedule like that, where you disappear for 2 months at a time, come back for a couple months, and then leave again, is it even possible to have a family in that kind of thing? I mean, how many guys actually have families, and what do you tell them that you're doing? I mean, I imagine you can't tell them anything at all. There's probably, I don't know, like, how does that work?
Yeah. Everybody's situation is different, man. But generally speaking, man, there was a lot of divorce. There was a lot of alcoholism. There was drug use, a lot of PTSD, a lot of fucking suicide. I couldn't believe how many people committed suicide, man. It's just fucking sobering. With regard to my first wife, not a smart move on my part. I met her in the bar business. I was a bouncer and she was a stripper, and Marine stereotype. I mean,
very Marine of you to
MCIs
do that.
Very Marine of me. I was just trying to make Chesty Puller proud. Obviously I couldn't trust her with too much information. But over time she kind of figured out that I probably wasn't, painting houses or some shit like that, Now she had a pill problem and she spent a lot of the money, which is another story. But that was not, that was my situation, and I thought it was unique, but it wasn't. Man, you talk to the other guys on the team, and man, the wives had depression or alcoholism, or the guy had alcoholism. The kids are getting in trouble. I can't remember the exact numbers, but you're one of about, I think there was about 120 of us in the world at one time that were assigned to the special programs. So it was this very, very unique skill set group of people that could do these jobs. Mm-hmm. And man, the phone was always ringing. And I don't know what it is, man, a moth to a flame or whatever, but you just, they kind of get the hooks in you. They look for this certain type of person that's mission oriented, and they can definitely abuse you. And I'm not a victim, or anything like that. But they would definitely, they would get their money's worth out of you, man, for sure.
I can understand.
They would.
I can understand how, like, it's hard on families, wives, kids, because mm-hmm. one, they have no idea what you're doing for real, mm-hmm. And two, it's so chaotic. It's not like, even in the military, it's tough on the families, but in the military, they at least can relate to each other. Like, if I'm deploying, my kid is in school with other kids whose dads are deployed. The spouses have other spouses that they can talk to, relate to. They kind of, there's that support system. I imagine that's not really there for.
Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist, man. And if they don't have if they don't have family. My wife now, man, I mean, if I had married her the first time around, I'd probably still be doing that job. Or, if I could pass the fucking PT test and everything. But she's solid, and she has, like her parents, and, like she's got a solid family. So you have to have that. The spouse has to have the solid backing, and the operator has to have that as well. I was never in the my goal was to go to the unit, and I should have pulled the trigger when I was younger. But in any case, as I understand it, one of the portions of the Delta selection early on in their process is they look to make sure that you have a stable family life, because the demands of the job, that's kind of like the weak point. Mm-hmm. If you don't have that, then it's going to come unraveled somewhere down the line.
Yeah. I remember talking to the one of the MARSOC Fires guys about going over there as a JTAC, and they they're almost trying to talk you out of doing it. They're like, "Hey, man, you need to understand, you're going to be gone 200 plus days a year. Like, are you ready for that? You're married. Is your family ready for that? And it's almost like when you're talking to them, you're like, are you a recruiter, or are you like giving me a warning? Like, what is this? It's kind of But I get it, because that's the last thing you can't be out on a mission and worrying about something going on back home, and it's like, because you become a liability. And when you're talking about high stakes missions, like you're talking about, liabilities just can't be accepted. So I guess that leads into my next question. You talk about guys are alcoholics or on drugs and stuff. How are they not weeded out? Like, how is that not identified? Like, hey, Bobby drinks a lot. Like, how is he still here? Like, do they just not see it, or they kind of keep a blind eye to it because this guy's a good dude on mission? So, as long as he can keep it together overseas, then we don't care what you're doing when you're back here for 60 days.
Yeah, it really depends. A lot of guys, some guys hide it overseas. Some guys don't. I saw a guy, man. I knew I knew he had probably been in a lot of shit, and he just had that look about him, man. And he had that demeanor, and I could tell this guy probably needed some help. But I was new to the team, and I didn't want to say anything. Man, he was a raging alcoholic, and he would pass out and sleep until noon, and he would miss. There were sometimes you got to do some admin moves, it's not always, dress up like a local and go sneak around and take pictures or whatever. And he missed a couple, man. And he was a good guy, I think. And I think if there was like a real serious gunfight, man, you would want this guy around. But man, eventually, man, you burn your bridge, and they're just like, hey, bro, man, you're a solid guy, man. We're going to get you some help, but you are no longer on the team. We packed up all your stuff while you're asleep. We gotta send you home today, man. We're gonna put you on a plane. You're not a bad guy, and look, you're gonna call this number when you get back, or someone's gonna meet you at the airport, and you're gonna do 30 days in a whatever, program of a what do you call it, a resident in. Yeah, an in-resident type of AA type stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and we're they don't just sell them down the river in most cases, but man, you can never come back to the team, and man, that's the guy that gave me my call sign, James Flynn, man, love the guy, man, but he had some injuries and some other issues that built up over time. And eventually they were like, man, you're on too many meds and stuff, and your injuries, we gotta man, you gotta call it good, man. And he killed himself, because he couldn't be on the team anymore. Like I said, man, there was a shocking amount of suicides, but
do you think that's a lot of it is the I'm never going to do anything this, crazy. Like so. This was the peak. This was my peak. Like why anything after this is going to be mundane for me.
Man. Like I think so, man. Yeah, I think so. I had a buddy, and his name is out there. His name's been on a couple of podcasts. Drew Dwyer. He was a Marine. Man, he was my team leader in Afghanistan in one place. Man, solid, man. And he retired, and he was like, man, I'm done. And I found out he actually went out to Hollywood. He was and I can't remember the movies he was in, but he was a technical advisor, and he was well paid, and he was well treated, and he had his retirement and everything. And I mean, he had it, man. He had made it. He was dating one of the, I can't remember what team, but man, the smoking hot fucking cheerleader, man. It was like, holy shit. Did you see who, because his call sign was Saint. It's like, man, did you see who Saint's dating? I'm like, no, man. I'm like, holy shit. I mean, this smoking hot chick, man. So he had money, he had retirement, he had the ultimate job in Hollywood, man. Everyone was looking for the guy, man. And just one day, man, he's just like, man, this isn't what I want. He killed himself,
That's so crazy.
Despite having all that. So you just never know.
Yeah. And see, it's crazy because you, on the outside looking in, you're you're going, man, he's got everything. You know, he's got everything I'd ever want. A good job, you know, cool girlfriend, fucking making money, probably got a cool house, cool cars. You know, and that's what most dudes are like, that's what I want. But I think it's like you hear, especially hear from celebrities and stuff, it's like, you know, at the end of the day, you're just a regular person and all those things are nice, but they don't fulfill you, you know? And if it's like something's not fulfilling you, I don't know, man. That's, it's a crazy world. I don't know. I don't think we're ever going to figure out how to stop suicides. I think it's an unfortunate side effect of life, right? I mean, you're going to go out one way or another. So. And I think some people just have that, like I said before, you know, this is it for me. This was my peak. I think one issue is that a lot of people think that they've peaked before they actually could have. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
They sell themselves short. You know, like you could have easily gone down a dark road as a bouncer, looking back on, man, I was a Force Recon Marine and fucking doing cool stuff. And now I'm kicking dudes out that have drank too much. You know, I'm trying not to get puked on by this drunk chick, you know, and like, I can see how that would lead down a very depressing road that could lead to something like that. But you kept up the mindset that there's something else out there for me, right?
Yeah. I mean, and trust me, man, everything you're saying about the darkness, it was there, man. I you know, depression like you would not believe. Now, this was pre-GWAT, so I didn't really have that big community to kind of, not that it's easier being in GWAT. I felt totally alone, man, and depression, absolutely full on depression and everything, man. It was very dark. I honestly don't know how I got through it, man. I just put one foot in front of the other. I tried to build up my flight time. I got involved in bodybuilding, you know, so I'd have a hobby. I competed in bodybuilding, just things to take your mind off your scenario, your situation was the best way that I got through those years. But absolutely, man, it was very, very, very dark time, man, for sure.
I think believing in yourself, man, knowing that, you know, if I keep grinding away, good things are going to happen, you know. I don't know. It's a tough world out there. And I got one last question and we'll wrap it up. You know, when you leave a unit, like you were talking about, especially if you're there for an extended period of time, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, how do you go find another job? What do you put on your resume for that? You know, how are you referred to? Like, are you destining yourself into being just a security guy for the rest of your life, or being some kind of contractor for the rest of your life if you do that kind of job? Or, I mean, obviously you said you knew a guy that went on and was a technical advisor and all that stuff so there's something out there, but how do you go away from that and move on to a different job, you know?
No, that's the question everyone asks themselves 10 times a day. What did it for me? I knew I had to get out. Now, I physically would not be able to pass the selection course over and over, or the standard that we did. At some point, I would just get too old, you know, because it's very high standards, and so I knew, or I would get killed. I mean, honestly, man, or get injured, you know. So I knew I had to find something else. But what did it for me was, you know, you always want to do a good job and be that solid guy. But I remember one time I was home and I got a phone call, and they said, hey, Tadpole, we go by call signs usually. Mom's Tadpole. They said, hey, Tadpole, how's it going? Hey, man, your name came up for a team leader position in a particular location that we haven't been in a long time. And I was like, fuck, that sounds badass, man. Hell yeah. I mean, me? Yeah, okay. And they're like, we're going to open up Mogadishu again. And we would like for you to be the team leader of the guys going into Mogadishu, and you're going to be running operations in Mogadishu. And man, it hit me, man, because, you know, I watched Black Hawk Down, you know, on TV, on CNN. That was like this big, tremendous, you know, I knew what they went through, at least, watching it on TV and the movie, of course, of all the crazy shit and just all the guys that I've talked to that have been there. And I'm like, man, how far down this road have I gone when I'm the guy that people think of that should be the team leader of the first team to go back into Mogadishu since, 1994, the last time they were there. Mm-hmm. And so, man, I really had to look myself in the mirror and be like, fuck, man, if I don't quit now, man, I'll never, so I, in the back of my mind, I was like, I've got to figure out a way to get it. I can't be, because I think if you can go too far, you know what I mean? And perhaps I went too far. Again, if I'm the name that comes up to lead the team going into Mogadishu, man, I've probably gone too far. I found out about, flying helicopters for the military and I knew I could do that later in life. And I knew that I could still support, these units and stuff like that. I could still be around the people that I had so much in common with, that I loved so much. But my name would not be coming up to be a team leader going to Mogadishu. You know what I mean? So I could have my cake and eat it too, if you will. And not everybody finds that answer, man. Everyone's looking for that answer, and know what? Not everybody finds it. I was very fortunate. I found the answer to that question, but man, not everybody does.
Yeah. I feel like, for me, the podcast is really good because I'm not in the military, obviously. But I get to talk military stuff with people all the time. Yeah. A lot of guys get out and they're running a PFT or running a range, shooting machine guns or in my case, doing close air support, blowing stuff up one day. Yeah. And then a week later, they're sitting on their couch back in their hometown, like time stopped and started again. And they're back to where they were. And they're like, what the fuck am I doing? Yeah, man. And it's, I don't know. It's, for me, that's been my kind of outlet, is to kind of maintain a pulse on what's going on and talk to people and kind of, because it's, I think that's what a lot of guys miss, is that camaraderie and that. Oh yeah. Just that, not even like the conversation is good because you understand, like we can talk and we know we've never served together, but we have done probably a lot of the same training. We both went to Marine Corps boot camp right there. Yeah. I can relate to somebody about that, you know? Man. Yeah. And I think that's what the VFW and the American Legion and stuff kind of used to serve that purpose. Yeah. It's kind of fallen off now. That's more of a World War II, Korean War, Vietnam veteran kind of, or it seems like organizations. I'm a member of the American Legion here in San Diego, and I'm like the youngest dude for sure. And and I'm 40, and I'm like for sure the youngest guy. And it's I don't know. I think people have to find something where if they're missing the military, they got to find something that's military adjacent. Or at least join a group or get into something where they can have those conversations and joke around and understand. I like going on Reddit and reading, like there's a USMC subreddit and stuff like that. And then it's funny reading some of the stuff that's going on nowadays. It's depressing reading some of the stuff that's going on nowadays, but at least I understand what they're talking about. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, I don't know. I was always a military guy, even when I was a little kid. My dad was in the Army, so that's all I ever wanted to do. And that's kind of, so when leaving it was really hard because it's just, I don't know. It's like a huge part of your life that you're leaving behind. It's very impactful. Yeah. And I don't think people really understand the impact of getting out until they do get out. And I'm sure that just amplifies every time, like in a case like yours where you move up the ladder of like intensity and like, and where you're doing a job where you feel like you're really having an effect. Maybe there's a lot of Marines that do the Marine Corps, do 4 years, never deploy, or maybe deploy once, and they're like, that was cool, not really what I thought it was going to be, and I don't know what kind of effect I had. Whereas like a job like you're talking about, there's like specific events I'm sure you can look back and be like, man, that was crazy. Like, and this was like a legitimate national security thing that we took care of, and you can be proud of that. So I don't know, man. It's a weird world out there. I think people should take a second and take a look at your book, War Junkie, A Cautionary Tale. I think it's aptly titled.
Thank you.
You know, I really appreciate you coming on. We're going to have to do another one because we haven't even gotten into your helicopter flying. You're rated on multiple helicopters and stuff like that. And you're currently overseas right now doing stuff. So it's like, we'll have to do another one down the road and catch up. And maybe, I'm going to try to, for the listeners, I'd like to start trying to do a live stream every once in a while and have people that have come on before come on and let people ask questions. Cause obviously,
that'd be great.
That way, because there's people that have questions that I don't think about until afterwards, or sometimes I'll see a question in the YouTube comments and I'm like, oh yeah, that would be cool. I'll ask them next time I have them on. So maybe we'll try to figure out something like that. But where can people pick your book up?
You can get it on Amazon. It's War Junkie, Cautionary Tale. It's on Amazon in hardcover, softcover, and ebook. You can go to my website and get it there, but it'll just take you to Amazon, kgspradleyauthor.com. I just released a video this morning on YouTube, KG Spradley Author, and it's essentially the guy that's going to do the voice of the book. His name is Ron Savak. He is a former Army medic, and now he's got his own business, and he's done a lot of radio and stuff over time. And he reads the foreword to the book, which was written by Jason Morrison, Force Recon Marine. He's got a website and a book called The Perfect Fucking Life, and it's kind of his life story. And he was in Ramadi as well. So that's where they can get the books. And let me just say, what you were talking about. I don't think you understand how much of an impact you make to veterans, because we all want to talk about this. We all want to share our experiences and kind of relive it and have the camaraderie. We don't know how. Guys like you have figured out how to kind of bring us all together with the podcast, man. You got a solid product. So just from all the veterans out there, man, that are looking, thank you. Because you're one of those few guys that made that happen, that can kind of bring everybody to this team room, if you will.
I appreciate it, man. It's my honor. I'm humbled by guys like you and, a lot of the dudes I've had on, the stories they've told, the being willing to open up and share some of the stories. Cause I know some of it's tough, to talk about or remember. And I'm glad that people feel, like I'm okay to talk to about that kind of thing. I feel like they can relate. I'm glad that we can have this back and forth, and it's just, and I'm glad too that the average person that's never served in the military gets to hear these stories, because they don't ever know. They don't know what's going on out there. They don't realize what the military is doing or what some of these contractors are doing out there. And it's their tax dollars that are paying the salaries. So they should know what's going on. Again, like I said before, I think a lot of stuff that the military does is overclassified for no reason. And it's just not fair to the American public, especially when we're asking the, mothers and fathers of people to send their kids into the military service. They should know what they're getting themselves into. They shouldn't go in blind. And, it's my honor to have you guys on and have all these guests and great people to come on and share their stories. As always, people can check out my website. It's jkramergraphics.com. My Instagram is Former Action Guys and Former Action News. Check those out. And that's it, man. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, dude.